If you like learning about the obscure history of the NFL on Jaguar Gator 9, then you're really going to like what's taking place on the all-new channel Jaguar Gator 8, where we talk all things college football. The first official published video coming 2 weeks from now on Monday, February 21st. And now, on with our feature presentation. Before I go any further, this has absolutely nothing to do with Lemmings. That is, hands down, the most disappointing and underwhelming advertisement in the history of the Super Bowl. There has never been a more hyped up ad that failed miserably. When you consider how the year before, 1984, was aired, and might have been the greatest ad in the history of the Super Bowl, when you consider how Apple had seat cushions for everyone at Stanford Stadium at Super Bowl XIX, and when you consider the backlash that the ad got in its aftermath for how disappointing it was. I already did an in-depth video on Lemmings, so if you want to learn more about that, click the card in the upper right corner. However, in some ways, the ad that's the topic of this video might have been more disappointing, because at least Lemmings was memorable in its hyped up failure, and it's still memorable roughly 40 years later. This, on the other hand, was a hyped up ad that was forgotten immediately. At Super Bowl XXXII, Intel decided to air a bold, new, and innovative ad that was truly the first of its kind, and was designed to take advantage of the technology available to them, and the technology that was prevalent in the world. Instead, it received almost no reception, and was a massive flop. This is the story behind Intel, and the most disappointing advertisement in Super Bowl history. Before I talk about the ad in question and why it underwhelmed badly, we need some context to understand what the company in question had done before the Super Bowl and what their grand plans were that were highly ambitious, making this ad all the more disappointing when the finished product finally aired. And before we talk about Super Bowl XXXII, we have to go back 1 year and talk about Super Bowl XXXI. Intel had just unveiled the MMX, which was a chip, and the company had a grand plan to promote the chip, including an advertising campaign of anywhere from $25 million to $30 million just in North America alone. And as part of that plan, they were going all out, with multiple commercials at Super Bowl XXXI. Now, for a company that has never advertised before the Super Bowl to come out and buy 2 spots is a massive gamble. But the gamble paid off in a big way, as both ads that they put out were very well received. One of them featured Seinfeld star Jason Alexander showing off the video calling technology that Intel had, which involved him trying to fake having a view of New York City. And the other one might have been the most successful advertisement in the history of the company, because that was the famous Play That Funky Music campaign, where a bunch of men in colorful suits were dancing while working. These men, known as the Bunny People, were a huge hit, and you can still buy Bunny People merchandise to this day. In fact, during the holiday season, thanks to the campaign that was launched at the Super Bowl, Intel sold over 500,000 Bunny People dolls. When you're creating an ad for the Super Bowl and you're able to recoup your costs and turn a significant profit on not the actual product in the ad, but on merchandise from the ad, that's when you know you have a winner. Intel's first appearance at the Super Bowl was a massive success. They improved and increased their brand recognition, they made their money back with ease with merchandise sales, and they created somewhat of a pop culture phenomenon and advertising phenomenon with the Bunny People. It made perfect sense after the warm and positive reception that they got on their first go-around that they would give it another go the following year at Super Bowl XXXII. But this time, they were going in a completely different direction. Instead of doing what seemed like the logical next step and expanding the Bunny People cinematic universe in the same way that the Budweiser frogs did with the chameleons, Intel went a completely different route. And their plan for Super Bowl XXXII, create one of the most innovative ads of all time. With every ad at the Super Bowl, the ad that is sent to the station is the one that is going to be aired. It's not as though the public has any say in the advertisement being shown. Once the company submits it to the station, that's the end of it. The commercials are completely set in stone. But at Super Bowl XXXII, Intel had a bold idea to showcase the fact that they were a technology-based company, to try and take advantage of what was available to them at the time, and to promote their website of Intel.com. What if for the first time ever, people could vote on what ad they wanted to air? How it would work was like this. In the second quarter, Intel would air a 60-second spot showing a mystery, and would ask the viewers to figure out which of the 2 suspects they thought committed the cybercrime. Viewers would vote on who they think did it, and then, whichever person got the most votes would have their ad aired during the 4th quarter of the game. Nothing like this had ever been attempted before. This was the first ad in the history of the Super Bowl that was going to be entirely decided during the game by the viewing audience. And no one knew how this was going to go, with Dennis Carter, the Senior Vice President for Marketing, saying on the spot, "It's hard to tell how many people will vote, but the message we're sending, more than the ad itself, is that mixing the media of television and the web is a pretty exciting direction for the future." Something like this might not seem all that crazy today, but back in 1998, this was nothing short of revolutionary. Ad agency Euro RSCG was responsible for creating the ad, and they were going all out, having none other than Steve Martin do the voiceover. Intel was excited about this interactive ad, with media relations manager Joanne Hasegawa saying, This is an experiment combining TV and the internet. We expect a lot of people to be watching as much for the commercials as for the game. And even though John White, one of the partners at Intel, said that the company was crossing their fingers that everything would work, since a ton of advanced planning and backup went into it, that the advertisement received enthusiastic support from CEO Andy Grove, who was fully on board with the interactive ad. This was, without a doubt, the most hyped up ad entering Super Bowl XXXII. The idea that you, at home, could actually determine in the middle of the game what advertisement will play at the Super Bowl, and that you could play along at home in what seemed like a meaningful way, was nothing short of huge. As for how the ad went, well, when the second quarter began and the ad aired, the hype died down tremendously.
It was a quiet day at Intel, till she walked in. She was a looker, all right, a real class act. The dame dropped the news that a Pentium 2 processor was missing, nabbed, gone. The scene of the crime? My own backyard, the Intel clean room. I dug for clues that would point me to the missing processor. There were no fingerprints. After all, it is a clean room. But who needs clues when you've got suspects, like Jimmy the Wire? He had guilt written all over his face. See, Jimmy nurses a computer game habit and craved the performance of the Pentium 2 processor. And then there's Susie the Mouse with those shifty eyes. Only the Pentium 2 processor could fuel her passion for hot websites. I've got it. You can help me. Go to Intel.com right now and tell me if it was Jimmy or Susie. You can make history by voting right now. Then we'll show the most popular choice in the fourth quarter. Go to the web now, Flick.
And then in the fourth quarter, to unveil the winner, this ad aired.
A Pentium 2 processor was missing. My sources on the web pointed me to Susie the Mouse. I gave her the third degree, the cooker, the big grill. But she was a tough nut to crack, so I figured her favorite websites powered by the Pentium 2 processor would make her talk. Finally, she sang like a canary in a karaoke bar. Case closed, thanks to you guys on the web.
Before I go any further, I want to emphasize one thing. I have no problem with Intel taking a chance here. None whatsoever. The worst thing you can do when making an advertisement at the Super Bowl is to play it safe. There's 50 some odd ads that air during every game, and if you do something that doesn't feel big, doesn't take a chance of some kind, or doesn't try to stand out in some way and differentiate itself from the crowd, you are going to be forgotten very quickly, and you just threw your money down the drain, which in this case would have been about $3.6 million, since Intel bought a 60-second spot for the setup and a 30-second spot for the reveal. Intel took a chance here, and I have to commend them for that. Airing an interactive ad at the Super Bowl like this was a bold strategy, and if it worked, and if the execution was good, this had the potential to be an all-timer. However, it did not work, and was quickly forgotten. It failed miserably. When the USA Today ad meter came out, Intel's ad finished nowhere close to the top spot, and was panned by many media outlets, including the New York Times, where writer Stuart Elliott held nothing back in trashing the spot. He said, "The biggest mystery was how anyone believed that a weak parody performed by actors wearing bunny suits, which offer no clues to the purported crime, qualified as a mystery. And low jokes about high technology drew winces, even when delivered by Steve Martin." That pretty much sums it up. Intel said that they were pleased with the reception, with Hasegawa saying that the reception to the ad was a phenomenal response. In total, 388,761 people voted and actually went to Intel.com during the Super Bowl to vote on the mystery. But there were many problems with this ad as to why it failed, and as to why it was not received well like Intel's ad at Super Bowl XXXI the year before. Number one, and I think the New York Times said it best, there was no mystery whatsoever. It's tough to tell a compelling story and mystery in 60 seconds and have a good setup and good characters and suspects. But if you're going to attempt it, then what Intel did is a prime example of what not to do. There are no defining characteristics of either Jimmy or Susie. They both look identical, so if you glance away for 2 seconds, you could easily mistake Jimmy for Susie. The only clue for both of them was that they liked using Intel. One of the most difficult things in screenwriting is to make you care about a character with minimal screen time without the character using any facial expressions or having any dialogue. That is almost impossible, especially in a 60-second spot. When you combine the lack of a true mystery with the fact that there was no compelling reason to care, it's not hard to see why this ad fell flat. And what was weird was that literally tucked into the advertisement, there was a pitch that would have been absolutely perfect and would have been incredibly compelling. Jimmy the Wire loved the racing game. You could have done an entire ad with that, show an incredibly compelling race like the ones you see in the stadiums, and ask people to go to Intel.com to pick who they want to win the race. It doesn't require a bunch of drunk people to think about clues and piece together who did what. It's exciting and gets everyone involved, and you can pull for characters with no facial expression or dialogue. Don't believe me? One of the most popular YouTube channels and sporting events during the pandemic was the Marble League, where people got legitimately heated over marbles racing each other. So this concept could have worked, but Intel decided to go with the mystery route, and it failed. Number 2, there was no way of knowing whether or not Intel was telling the truth, and whether or not you actually got to decide on the right one. If something was said during the ad or before the ad that said 70% of people voted for this response, and it showed the results on the screen or something like that, that would be one thing. But that did not happen. The last thing you want to do when introducing a vote is to have a system where you have a fear that your vote does not matter. And the last thing you want is to have a system where no matter what, the winning choice is the right choice. It'd be one thing if Jimmy was the one to do it, and if Susie was the most popular answer, it would be revealed that America failed and got it wrong. But that was not the case. Whatever you voted was the right choice. A game where you win no matter what you do is not a fun game. And the weird part about not publicly revealing the percentage of the vote, or any voting updates during the game, was the fact that Intel shot 2 different endings. You'd think that the faceless character design was so that they only had to shoot one ending, but just have a slightly different voiceover, and make it seem like this scene from The Simpsons.
Oh, absolutely. My favorite team's in it. The Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, ever since I was a boy, I've always loved the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, they're good, but I wouldn't count out the Denver Broncos.
But nope, they actually shot 2 different endings. The voiceover was different, the computer screen shown was different, and the entire thing was different. So there was no incentive to not reveal the information if you legitimately put the work in to shoot 2 different endings and legitimately go with the ending that most people voted for. Number 3, I'm not sure Intel understood how the setup of the average house looked back in 1998. Now today in 2022, something like this could absolutely work. People just vote on an app on their smartphone, and with a click of a button in a process that takes all of 5 seconds, can determine whether it was Jimmy or Susie that did it. But this was 1998. You couldn't do this on your phone, so you had to do this on your home computer. Where is a home computer traditionally located? It's located in the computer room, or an office, or the bedroom, or something along those lines. It's not located in the TV room or the basement where you're watching this game if you're at a party. Think of the call to action here that Intel was asking their viewing audience to make. The person watching this ad that had to vote on it had to leave their party or leave their spot when they're watching the game, go to the computer, turn it on and wait for that loading screen to finish, then had to get onto the internet, which was not particularly fast back in the late 90s, and make the vote. This had the potential to be a 5 to 10 minute process. Think of how much of the game you're missing. Think of the fact that if you're the one hosting the party, you're leaving your guests to go on the computer. That is a lot to ask of someone. And that's not even considering the fact that guests at parties and people watching the game at bars can't participate because they don't have access to a computer. Just because Intel had the capability to do an interactive ad like this didn't mean that they should, because the logistics behind it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And Intel might say that they were pleased with the response, as over 388,000 people voted, but think of how many eyeballs were on that Super Bowl advertisement and how many people were watching. You had an average television audience of 90 million viewers, and a peak television audience of 133.4 million viewers, which was the 3rd most watched Super Bowl ever at its peak at the time. You have 133.4 million people watching the game, and a mere 388,761 people voted. That's 0.29% of people. If you run an advertisement and drop somewhere in the ballpark of $4 million on just buying the spot, plus more money for the production costs and hiring the actors and getting Steve Martin to do 2 minutes of voiceovers, and only 0.29% of people are interested enough to care, that seems like a giant waste of money. Especially since this isn't 0.29% of people buying the product. This is just 0.29% of people being really bothered enough to click a button. However, there was one element that Intel could not account for that kind of screwed them over and made people not care about this interactive ad. And that was the fact that, well, the Super Bowl was legitimately incredible. Some people called Super Bowl 32 at the time the best Super Bowl ever played, and everyone had that inside the top 5 at minimum. The Green Bay Packers were heavily favored over the Denver Broncos, especially after Green Bay was the defending champion, after all the times that John Elway made the Super Bowl and fell flat, and after the NFC had won the Super Bowl every year since Super Bowl 19 in 1985. But the game was a true back-and-forth affair, and the Broncos prevailed 31-24 after Terrell Davis scored his 3rd touchdown of the game with less than 2 minutes to go. If the game was a blowout, then maybe people would stick around and care about this ad, since it would be the only mystery left in the 4th quarter. But here, no one cares about whether Jimmy or Susie did it. No one cares about that when the mystery wasn't very good, when there's no emotional attachment to the characters, and when there's an actual mystery taking place on the field as to who's going to win this game and be crowned the world champions of football. And even though Intel said that they were happy with the response, 2 weeks later, they hired a new advertising agency, bringing on Messner Vetier to team up with Euro RSCG. Now, Ann Loons, the worldwide advertising director for Intel, said that it had nothing to do with the Super Bowl, saying there's no dirt. However, the timing of this was definitely bizarre and raised a few eyebrows. It's like how Fallon, the advertising agency that was originally supposed to do the LifeMiners.com ad at Super Bowl 34 but declined because of the impossible constraints put on them, left not even 24 hours after the Super Bowl and said that it had nothing to do with the game. You say that, but come on. The timing is too coincidental and too much money was spent for the average person to genuinely believe that, and to believe that the Super Bowl wasn't at least somewhat of a factor in this call. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Look, Intel swung for the fences and they took a chance. They dared to try something bold and innovative, especially since this was 1998 that we were talking about. And again, if the execution was there, with maybe a different concept and premise or a different script, or maybe if Intel bought a few more spots to flesh out the story so the build-up wasn't contained entirely in the 60-second spot, then this absolutely could have worked, and could have been a revolutionary ad. Instead, Intel did the one thing they could never want any company to do after making a Super Bowl ad. They were completely forgotten. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. If you want to see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.